speak loud, but is this okay? Is it okay back there? No? How about this?
That's on.
Hello? Oh. So that's good. All right, cool. Okay, give me just 1 second here. All right, well, good afternoon. So I'm the after lunch guy, so I have to be extra engaging to keep you awake. Fortunately, I have experience keeping people awake, so hopefully we'll be okay. Some of you, mostly guys, will probably, I might lose some of you, but that's okay. So my name's Adam Roberry, and I am blessed to be here with you today. I know the subject is one we all wished we didn't need to talk about, but we definitely do. We definitely do need to talk about this subject. By way of introduction, I have been working in the field of addiction treatment since 2009. I've worked as a certified alcohol and drug counselor, a halfway house coordinator, a program director, an operations director, a training director, and now currently an Aspire to Excellence director. And I know you don't know what that is, but it's basically HR. Okay? So I do training, onboarding, and recruiting. I did some work with Family Recovery Center back in Idaho Falls, back before they closed. Then I worked at ARA, also before they closed. And then I went to Renaissance Ranch, outpatient treatment, shortly before they closed. Now you're seeing a pattern here. It has nothing to do with me. But then I moved to Brick House Recovery, and I currently work with them. I'm a member of the Community Suicide Prevention Board. I'm a born-again Christian and pastor. I am a husband, a father, a son, a brother, and a friend. As a counselor, I've gotten close to a number of clients who have made suicide attempts and others who have died by suicide or overdose. Many times that can be the same thing, unfortunately. As a father, I've had children who have struggled with self-harm and thoughts of suicide themselves. As a friend, I have been a support person to people who I love who have struggled with thoughts of suicide, and some who have died by suicide. Personally, I'm a man who has struggled with suicidal ideation for most of his life, and who lacked hope for most of his life, but has found lasting hope, joy, and peace. I'm a person with a story that might resonate with some of you, or it might resonate more with people that you're trying to help. Either way, I hope my story can be valuable in some way. So let's get into it. From Parade magazine comes the story of self-made millionaire Eugene Land, who greatly changed the lives of a 6th grade class in East Harlem. Mr. Land had been asked to speak to a class of 59 6th graders. Now, what could he say to inspire these students, most of whom would drop out of school? That's what the statistics would show. He wondered how he could get these predominantly black and Puerto Rican children even to look at him. Scrapping his notes, he decided to speak to them from his heart. Stay in school, he admonished them, and I'll help pay the college tuition for every one of you. Now, at that moment, the lives of those students changed. For the first time, they had hope. One student said, I had something to look forward to, something waiting for me. It was a golden feeling. Nearly 90% of that class went on to graduate from high school. Why? You see, they had hope because someone was willing to pay a price for them that they could not pay themselves. In this life, most people desire to have hope, joy, and peace. Right? Most people want hope, joy, and peace. However, when those things prove to be elusive or difficult to obtain, life can begin to seem like too much to bear. There are all kinds of factors and experiences that contribute to lack of hope in people's lives. we couldn't cover them all here today. I've been invited here today to share my story of hope with you, because I've been without hope and it nearly brought me to my end. But I found hope when, similar to the students I shared about, I realized someone was willing to pay a price for me that I could never pay. But that comes later in my story, so let's not jump ahead. Now, in order to effectively share my story of hope, I have to start from the beginning and share where I lost hope. I was born into a lifestyle of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's how I describe my story. I was born into a lifestyle and a family of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's just the way it was. I didn't know any different. Everyone in my family, as far as I know, used substances in one form or another. As far as I can tell, there was no godly influence on either side of my family. Mom and Dad were divorced well before I was born, so I came into a broken home situation right out the gate. When I was 3 years old, Mom had been married to a man named Charles. We called him Chuck. And Chuck was a drummer, an alcoholic, and a very physically abusive man. Now, I need to pause here and give a fair warning. I'm not going to spend much time on this part of my story, but what I will share may be difficult to hear, particularly if you have a history of abuse trauma. So I just want to be clear about that. Like I said, I'm not going to spend much time here, but it's such an integral part of my story, I couldn't effectively tell it without telling this part. So if you're concerned about being emotionally triggered, please feel free to step out, do whatever you need to do. I completely understand. But if you can bear with me, you will find that although my story here is quite heavy, it provides a radical contrast for the hope I would find later in life. So, when I was 3 years old, Mom's married to Chuck, and Chuck is an abusive man. And on one particular evening, he was particularly upset about something. And so Chuck took Mom in the bedroom and proceeded to abuse her. And I heard the crashing and the banging and the screaming and the yelling and all the stuff, and I was kind of used to that. But this time, it was particularly bad. And I remember, I have vivid memories, see, these are some of my first memories, of standing in the living room, thinking to myself, I should do something. Now, I was 3 years old, thinking I should do something to stop this. I should protect my mom. And I didn't do anything. I didn't stop it. I didn't protect her. Now, after a while, the crashing and the banging stopped, and Chuck called me into the bedroom. And there was my mom, beaten and bruised and broken and bloody and knocked out. And Chuck said to me, "Look what you made me do." Now, for all the mental health professionals in the room, what internal thing did I develop in that very moment? Any guesses? Core beliefs, right? I developed core beliefs in that moment. Chuck looked at me and he pointed at her and he said, "Look what you made me do." After I had already convinced myself I should do something, but I didn't do anything, right? Core beliefs. So that core belief that I developed at that time was something to the effect of, my life has no real meaning or value, my very existence causes pain and suffering in the lives of those I love, and they would be better off without me, right? Now at that time, I certainly could not have articulated that, nor even recognized that, but in hindsight, I can clearly see those were the core beliefs that followed me clear into my adult life and drove so much of my behavior and my self-hate. At 3 years old, I experienced a brokenness that I could not reconcile and I could not even understand. My spirit was broken and I had no real hope. Mom nearly died that evening. But afterward, she got help to leave Chuck, and we moved to Boise, she and my sister and myself. Now that being said, that was not nearly the end of the chaos or turmoil in our lives. That was just an end to that particular chaos. Now it's notable that although I had no real hope, and I was unable to really understand what was going on in my heart or in my life at 3 years old, I had this other experience at about 5 or 6 years old. And this is important. There were a few of these through my life that will make a lot of sense later in my story. So I was outside the house by myself, 5 or 6 years old. I found this soda bottle. This is going to sound kind of silly, but this is my experience. Now, despite having no Christian or religious influence in my life, and really no reason to believe in any kind of good God, I decided that I wanted to give a gift to God. Somehow I had this belief that there was a God, and that God was good and worthy of my gift. And so I filled this bottle with sticks and grass and rocks and just things that I could find on the ground, and I proceeded to throw it into the air, hoping that God would keep it. It was my gift to God, right? And guess what happened? It fell down every time, right? To my disappointment, God never kept the gift. But this is actually a crucial part of my story. It's not just some cute thing I did. Because though I was broken, though I was lost, there was something in me that believed there was something bigger and better out there. Something good. Someone good. I still had this glimmer of hope, I suppose. Now, the first time I can really recall actually contemplating suicide, I was around 8 years old. Now, what could possibly trigger an 8-year-old boy to contemplate such things? Well, in this case, he was being rejected by his siblings. Seems kind of normal for a child to experience. They were annoyed with him, and so they ditched him at home. Him being me. But for me, it wasn't just kids being kids, you see. It was confirmation of what I had been feeling and believing inside all along. It was further confirmation of my core beliefs, right? You remember those core beliefs. My life has no real meaning or value. My very existence causes pain and suffering to those I love, and they would be better off without me. Of course, by this time I had developed some more core beliefs to go along with those core beliefs. Something to the effect of, my value is determined by how others treat me and how they view me. And if people treat me bad, I must be bad. I was broken. I had no real hope. And the truth is, I desperately wanted to feel different than I did, but I couldn't change it. Now, I don't want to paint a picture of just complete agony, right, through my childhood. We still had some good times, and I had some friends. There were people around me who loved me. We went camping, we went on road trips. I rode bicycles and I played Nintendo. All of these things happened, but none of them could give me lasting hope. At age 9 was a big year for me in my search for meaning and relief from my feelings and my confusion and my core beliefs. At age 9, I got drunk for the very first time, smoked pot for the first time, smoked cigarettes, and engaged in sexual activity. Age 9 was a pretty big year for me. The thing is, when I got drunk for the first time, I remember rolling around on the living room floor, and my sister and her friends, they got me drunk. I remember my sister saying, "You're going to get sick." And I was just having so much fun, and everyone was laughing. I thought, how could this be a bad thing? It felt like they liked me, right? Like I was acceptable to them. Now again, I couldn't have articulated this at the time, but in hindsight I can see that I felt so free when I was intoxicated. So free from those feelings and the burdens. It was like I thought, maybe this is what will give me value. We should keep doing it. Maybe this is what will make me worth having around. Now, as you can imagine, I puked my guts out that night. I puked my guts out. Now, I've always had a thing for counting. For whatever reason, I just count things. And so it was that way then, and it's that way now. And so I remember throwing up and then passing out and waking up and throwing up. I did that 12 times. So I remember vividly, I threw up 12 times that night. It was awful, terrible. I hate puking. Who likes puking? Nobody likes puking. It was terrible. I've always hated throwing up, and yet I said to myself after that experience, let's do that again. Right? That's like the mind of a true alcoholic. Let's do that again. We should do that. Not because I wanted to throw up, but because I wanted the effect of the alcohol. Because I wanted the relief. Because I wanted to not have to question my value for just a few minutes. You see, what I had discovered was not hope, but a temporary distraction and reprieve from my feelings of hopelessness and thoughts of worthlessness. I believe I was immediately addicted to every substance I ever used. Not so much because of the addictiveness of the drug itself, but because of the way it gave me an escape for a time. It gave me relief. Now, I was about 11 years old when I was told by my sister that my dad is not my biological father. This is a pretty significant event in my life. Now, one would think, because he had been being a dad for me the whole time, one would think that I would have been honored that he would choose to be my dad. And the truth is, I am so honored and grateful that he chose to be my dad. And though I was also grateful for him at that time, that news really served to tell me that my biological father wanted nothing to do with me, and that I was an outsider in half of my family. Now, I do want to pause here and acknowledge that my dad and I are very close. In fact, he lives with me. And so I'm so grateful to have my dad. I'm so very grateful that he was willing to take me as his son, even though he had zero obligation to me. He taught me what it means to choose to love someone, even though you didn't help create that person. Now, I attribute much of my ability to love and embrace my 4 children, though I did not help create any of them, to him. And so I'm so grateful to my dad. But that was a shocking time in my life, to learn this and to have that contribute to these core values that I'd been struggling with since I was 3 years old. At the age of 13, I started using meth. Now, this was a whole different level of distraction, and just like the other drugs, I was immediately addicted. At the age of 15, I started using needles and got into a very unhealthy long-term relationship. Now, IV drug use was like instant, temporary oblivion. It worked. But like everything else I had tried, the key word was temporary. Temporary. It was not an actual solution. That relationship that I mentioned that I'd gotten into seemed like it would solve all my problems. Right? 15 years old, this is great. This is going to solve everything for me. But just as always, the hopeful feelings soon began to fade. It was only temporary. You see, I was broken. I had no real hope. And I began to feel like hope was dead for me. Like hope was just dead for me. You remember my old core beliefs. My life has no real meaning or value. My very existence causes pain and suffering in the lives of those I love. They would be better off without me. My value is determined by how others view me or treat me, and if people treat me bad, it must mean I am bad. Add to that set of core beliefs the fact that I did have a conscience, right, at 15 years old. Conscience is a word that means with knowledge. So conscience just means you have knowledge, right? You know something. And so my conscience bore witness to the fact that how I was living was not good. Deep down, I knew the things I was doing were not right. I knew that lying and stealing and getting high was wrong. I knew skipping out on work because I was hungover was wrong. I knew my relationships were unhealthy. I knew it was wrong for me to owe 3 months of back rent and then ditch my landlord without even cleaning the house, you know? I knew it was wrong to steal change from my dad's truck so I could buy cigarettes. Like, I knew it was wrong. So my core beliefs, plus the fact that I knew my thoughts, words, and actions were wrong, meant that without some source for hope, my only real option, at least as far as I was concerned, was to keep pushing through, just keep pushing through, hopelessly, only getting reprieve when I was actively getting or being high, or simply end it all. And I'd already contemplated suicide through my life. And so at age 15, thinking about suicide became a very frequent thing for me moving forward. If I wasn't high, I was likely thinking about how and when and where I could bring my life to an end. Now, you might be thinking, I thought this conference was supposed to be about stories of hope. Stories of hope. Or I thought this guy's talk was titled, Hope is Alive. Hey, where's the hope? Well, let's get to some hope, shall we? The school system in a large city had a program to help children keep up with their schoolwork when they were spending time in the hospital because of injuries. One day, a teacher who was assigned to the program received a routine call asking her to visit a particular child. She took the child's name and room number and talked briefly with the child's regular class teacher. "We are studying nouns and adverbs in his class now," the regular teacher said, "and I'd be grateful if you could help him understand them so he doesn't fall too far behind." The hospital program teacher went to see the boy that afternoon. Now, no one had mentioned to her that the boy had been badly burned and he was in great pain. Upset at the sight of the boy, shocked at what she had seen, she stammered as she told him, I've been sent by your school to help you with nouns and adverbs." She struggled. When she left, she felt like she hadn't accomplished anything. She felt like she just failed miserably at that. But the next day, a nurse asked her, "What did you do to that boy?" The teacher felt she must have done something wrong, and she began to apologize. No, the nurse said, "You don't understand what I mean." She says, "We've been worried about that little boy, but ever since yesterday, his whole attitude has changed. He's fighting back, responding to treatment. It's as though he's decided to live." 2 weeks later, the boy explained that he had completely given up hope until the teacher arrived. Everything changed when he came to a simple realization. He expressed it this way. He says they wouldn't send a teacher to work on nouns and adverbs with a dying boy, would they? You see, he found hope because he believed he was given a gift that you would not give to someone who had no hope, someone who was hopeless or worthless or not worth investing in. And so he had hope because of the gift, you see. On August 16, 2002, when I was 18 years old, a little girl was born in Idaho Falls. Now, though I did not help to create this girl, and knowing that her biological father wanted nothing to do with her, I got to sign the birth certificate and choose to be her father. I'm so grateful for that. What a gift. My daughter's name is Adrienne. We call her Adrienne. She was a gift that gave me a reason to fight, a reason to live. You see, I can't make babies. And although I did not have any kind of faith at that time, and this is another one of those little parts of my story that will make more sense later, but it's so important. I didn't have any kind of faith at that time when she was born, but my reaction to Adrienne was, maybe this is God's way of giving me a child. See, I always wanted to be a dad. I think it's because I had a dad who chose me, and I wanted to be somebody who chose someone else. And so I said, maybe this is God's way of giving me a child. Now again, this is an important part of my story because although I had no real belief in God, I had this experience where I was attributing good things to God. Now the truth is that I know now that she absolutely was a gift from God. Now, to be clear, Adrian was this great gift. And the reality is that I didn't get sober until she was 4 years old. So she was this wonderful gift. Many addicts, before they go to rehab, like to do this, what we call one last hoorah, right? And so rather than spend the weekend with my daughter, which is what you would think a loving father would do, I spent the weekend trying to get high. One last hurrah. But I can tell you that for some reason, try as I might, I could not get hold of any drugs. I just couldn't find any drugs. Nobody would give me anything. It was as if God was saying, Adam, it's time to be done. Adam, if you're going to blow off this opportunity I'm giving you, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to work really hard at it. Now, I confess that I did get a hold of some alcohol. So my sobriety date is not November 17th, it is November 20th, 2006. That's when I had my last bit of alcohol. Now, one might think that sobriety gave me lasting hope, joy, and peace. But it did not. Just like Adrian was not my source of hope, sobriety was not my source for hope. Remember my old core beliefs? Well, those old core beliefs were still there. Those thoughts of suicide still crept up. As I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, my value remained the same as it did when I was 3 years old. But on the bright side, I was sober. I was clean. My mind was at least more clear and I had opportunity. On the bright side, I did gain some friends in sobriety, some really good friends. I got a sponsor in a home group and I chaired meetings and I sponsored people, all the stuff that I tell people to do now, right? I decided that I wanted to go to school to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I was in a steady relationship with a woman who I had asked to be my wife. Things were looking up. At 2 years sober, my life was looking so much different. A lot better. And yet there was still something missing inside of me. That elusive, lasting hope. Was hope truly dead for me? I had to wonder. Would I just have to settle for temporary, short-lived feelings of hope, joy, and peace? How could my life be so much better and yet I still be so plagued by inner turmoil and thoughts of suicide? How could this be? Now, around 2 years sober, I was in school to become a drug and alcohol counselor. I was laid off from my drywall job and I was helping my friend Kenny lay carpet for a few days. Kenny was a sober guy, a recovery guy, and a Christian guy. He's a really cool guy. He is a really cool guy. He's not dead. Kenny's still around. Love Kenny. But Kenny was the kind of guy who didn't really listen to music. He listened to talk radio. But if he wasn't listening, which is kind of annoying. It's like, come on, Kenny. You know, when you're hanging out with Kenny, it's like, can we listen to something a little more entertaining than like Rush Limbaugh? I'm nothing against it, but it's just like one of those things. So, like Kenny, he wasn't listening to talk radio. He was listening to AA speakers on CD, or he was listening to pastors' messages. And one particular day, Kenny was listening to a pastor's message from a pastor named James MacDonald. And James MacDonald shared so clearly about this lasting, eternal hope that is found through faith in Jesus. Now, some of you maybe squirmed in your seat just a little bit there. Always going to start talking about Jesus, right? And I understand completely. This is a suicide prevention conference. And I'm a pastor, but this isn't church. Totally get it. But I do have two things to say about this that will hopefully give you some comfort in this part of my story. Number one, this is my story of hope, and I need to tell it. I need to tell it because someone may need to hear it. Number two, whether or not you have any interest in Jesus, if you are a person who has people in your life you will likely come across somebody who does believe in Jesus and who needs to hear about that hope, who needs to be reminded of that hope, right? You'll be able to support and encourage them. It will behoove you to just have a little understanding of where that hope is for them. So, what Pastor James MacDonald shared made total sense to me. It made total sense to me because although I had worked very hard to change my life, and my life had changed significantly, I still lacked lasting hope, joy, and peace. And I couldn't make sense of it other than to say, maybe there was something missing for me. Pastor James shared that hope is alive in the person of Jesus Christ. I learned that hope was not something to be obtained or understood, but rather someone who would never blame me for my mother's pain and suffering, like I had been doing my entire life. Someone who would carry the weight of all my sin and failure for me. Someone who loves me with an unimaginable love. Someone who I could never disappoint. And you know what happened? Those old core beliefs began to disappear. Because they didn't jive with what I was learning about my true value. I learned that my value is not determined by people or circumstances or even how I view myself. My value is determined by the price he was willing to pay for me. A high price indeed. Now you remember those kids at the beginning of my talk? They had hope for the first time because someone was willing to pay a price for them that they couldn't pay themselves. And for the first time in my life, I had lasting hope because I realized someone was willing to pay a price for me that I couldn't pay myself. You see, hope is alive. Hope is alive. I have found lasting hope, joy, and peace. Now, I may not always feel hopeful all the time about everything. Even though I have this hopeful life and my life is happy, why do I still struggle with this from time to time? My hope is that it can be comforting to know there are other people that still struggle. You know, we can't always control our thoughts, but we can control what we dwell on and on our actions. We can choose to not dwell on those thoughts, and we can choose not to follow them through. We can choose that today. We can choose to share our thoughts with someone we trust and talk with them about it. See, hope doesn't mean you never struggle. It doesn't mean you never have issues. Hope means when you struggle, you can rest in that which gives you lasting hope, joy, and peace. Hope means that when you struggle, you know there are people you can talk to. Because they've told you you can talk to them. They've opened the door. Having hope means having a source for hope that is lasting and that you can always rest in, no matter what thoughts or challenges you face. Now, I want to address the middle-aged men in the room, or anyone who loves a middle-aged man. To be honest, I don't know how being Caucasian factors into suicide risk. I'm not really going to talk about that. I need to learn more about the racial factors, right? But that's not what I'm going to address right now. What I want to address is men, really, and those who love men. Like it or not, men are hardwired to be providers, producers, and protectors. Whether we realize it or not, men, we find so much of our value in being able to provide, produce, and protect. But even when we are doing our very best, we often feel like it's not enough. Like it's just not enough. Kind of like that 3-year-old boy who thought he should protect his mother but didn't, right? It just wasn't enough. Now, in my personal experience, one of the biggest struggles I have with my worth and value, even today, is feeling like I'm not doing enough to provide, produce, and protect for those I love. And when I'm feeling that I'm failing at it, I can lose sight of things again. Those feelings can come back for me. But my wife and I, we have this thing that we do for one another. It helps us to be validated and encouraged. Has anyone here seen James Cameron's Avatar, 2009 movie? I think it was 2009. Yeah? Seen James Cameron? Okay. Some of you have. Well, there's this scene in the movie where Neytiri says to Jake Sully, "I see you." Remember that scene? Yeah. She says, "I see you." Well, what she's saying is not that she physically sees him with her eyes, but that she sees him as a person with a soul, right? She sees him. She sees what he's going through, and she's right there with him to love him through it. So when I'm struggling, my wife notices, and she'll tell me, "I see you." And I know what she's saying. She's saying, "I see you, the person with the soul. I see what you're going through. I'm right here with you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm here for you." Right? I know in that moment that I'm not alone and that I am enough for her. I know that she's right there with me and that she will love me through whatever I'm going through. Everyone needs someone in their life who cares enough to notice when they're struggling and to let them know that they see them. I want to encourage you, men, because sometimes men are just like, we just feel like we have to put on the strong front, right? But I want to encourage you to allow others to know what your struggles are, so that you can have someone in your life who sees you, who can see what you're going through, and be with you in it. And I want to encourage you all to be someone in the life of others who cares enough to notice and cares enough to say, "I see you today." I want to be that kind of person moving forward in my life, who notices what's going on with people. Or even if I don't, just like we talked earlier, maybe there's no signs, but am I the kind of person who's willing to say, "Hey man, I just want to check in with you. You doing okay? How's life? Let's talk. I just want you to know I see you." You know, if I had just had someone, and I can't regret the past and I can't change the past, but if I had just had someone in my life when I was growing up who really made the effort to see me and then tell me about it, I believe things could have been much different. I believe that. But I praise God for my wife and for the others in my life today who see me. And I'm so blessed. I'm surrounded by people who see me. And I choose to be the kind of person today who sees others and tells them about it. I see you. Finally, excuse me, I want to share some words from a recent Suicide Survivors Memorial Walk I got to speak at. This was actually yesterday, so it's very recent, just yesterday evening. So I shared these words. There is a song by the band For King and Country. The song is titled, "Hope is What We Crave." This song is a reminder that all people crave hope. Now I'll take it further and say that we don't only desire hope or crave hope, but we need hope. For many people, their hope was shaken when they lost someone so suddenly and so tragically. Hope was shaken when they were thrown into a pain they could never have imagined or prepared for. We find that hope is indeed what we crave, but it is very difficult to find for a time. But when we come to a place like this, at a time like this, for a reason such as this, we are reminded hope is still very much alive. Hope is alive. We look around and we see there are others who have endured such hopeless times as we have. So we're not alone. There are others who have learned to seek out avenues of hope and healing side by side. So we're united. We realize there are still people who love us and who we get to love. Our lives have meaning. We are reminded reasons for hope can be found in the warm embrace of a loved one, or the laugh of a small child, or the comfort of a group, or the satisfaction of serving somebody. Hope is fostered in giving love despite how risky it can be. It's risky to love, but it's worth it. Hope is fostered in connecting with others despite our fears of losing that connection. Hope is fostered in honoring the memories of those who've gone before us. Hope is fostered in becoming passionate about life and teaching others to do the same. Hope is fostered in faith for a loving God despite not always knowing why things happen the way they do. Remember, hope is what we desire, it's what we crave, and it is what we need. Hope is not found in forgetting, but in remembering. Remembering and honoring the people we love who have gone before us. Remembering and honoring the people we love who are still with us. And remembering that we can be avenues of hope for others. Now, often it seems that we cannot see any hope after a tragic loss until we release something. Maybe it's anger or bitterness toward God or others that we need to release. Maybe it's fear or doubt because we don't want to be hurt again. We need to release that fear and doubt. Maybe it's blaming ourselves or even blaming others. But we find that when we release those things that need to be released, our eyes begin to focus once again, and we can see hope take flight. So remember, hope is alive. Thank you.